Right, well here we are. We've got a sign here that says special area to protect our drinking water. No entry. Maximum penalty $11,000. No entry, no vehicles, no bicycles, no motorbikes, no horse riding, no pets. In short, Sydney Water doesn't want you in there, with good reason. This is the catchment for our drinking water. This represents an eastern part of the Woronora catchment system. Now the reason we're pointing this out is that we're just a couple of 100 metres short of a huge proposal at Darks Forest on the golf links for a 100-room hotel, 100 serviced apartments and 200 residential blocks. As you can see, we're just across the road at the Darks Forest interchange. Up here we've got a 40k school zone, which is just this side of where this proposal is. You can see it's a fairly narrow road, poor line of sight, but it's a long speedway. Well, here we have the MET school campus. We're just up the road from where we were last filming, the Darks Forest turnoff. Up there is where this proposal would be put. We're on a road which would see 3,500 car movements per day extra to what's existing here. Small illustration of what will be repeated over and over again. If this proposal from Links Development goes ahead, this proposal will see an extra 3,500 car movements on this road. The RTA is realising even now that this road is not built for it, and there's going to have to be a lot more maintenance to put this proposal 10 kilometres north of Helensburgh, out in the middle of nowhere, along this fairly narrow road. And we need a lot more of that. This road falls under the jurisdiction of Wollongong City Council, so the maintenance of this road will be paid for by Wollongong City Council's funds, and so it'll impact on where existing ratepayers' money is spent. Well, I'm outside the Illawarra Country Club, which is a beautiful little golf links here in the Illawarra, and this is the site. This is the actual location where this proposal would be situated. Right, well, we're looking at that hill that we were looking up to before, and that road actually goes over quite a little lip. Gives you a poor line of sight either way. Not quite enough to get a car airborne unless you were going at aeroplane speeds, but still sufficiently high to block the line of sight. Now you can imagine an extra 3,500 car movements coming along this road with that as a problem, plus this long straight. No matter what the policing, you're always going to have people wanting to go fast. This is a long open stretch. It's the side of model aeroplanes that have flown over there. Long sort of an uncontrolled speedway. We got problems. Now where we are here, we've got the Darrawal Reserve, and over here, this proposal would come all the way down the hill to where those cars are found. Right, well, from what you've seen, it looks like we're actually south of this golf links. we may be today, but we're actually still within the site, which is part of this proposal. Right, now all this is the very top part. This is where we have the watershed that flows into the upper tributaries of Maddens Creek. And where does it go from there? Well, Maddens Creek heads off to the Woronora, which is the most pristine, the last wonderful catchment area in Sydney. As well as that, some of the water also goes into the Georges River, and some of it actually finds its way through the Nepean. So we're dealing with a very, very precious region. This is the very utmost point. You pollute this, you pollute the lot. Well, these swamplands that we have up the top here support a fair diversity of flora. We've got, distinguishing front here, we've got some swamp banksia. We've got some prickly hakea. Got this lovely array of native grasses. We've got a pacris. These are typical heathland, swampy area type plants. Today it's lovely and blue sky. However, this area is subject to fairly dramatic changes of weather. We're almost at cloud height. In fact, we're above cloud height often in the Illawarra. And when you have rain events, this area is totally covered with fog, which is a problem for aeroplanes, but it's also a problem for motor cars. And so if we have, as we said, an extra 3,500 cars per day on that roadway, they'll be driving in a fog. So all this region is subject to extreme weather. That will affect car movements and all those living here. Right, we're in this watershed. You get a little bit of wildlife. Here's an example of the fauna. Little sandpiper. Right, well, we're looking here at pouch coral fern. This is similar to what you've got at the hanging swamp over there at Stanwell Tops. And if we just come back and have a look at where the area's been disturbed, what we find is we've got fairly fragile soils here. Very, very fine sand. Mud and dirt. When you disturb soils like this, and you have water flowing over it, even in a gently sloping region like this, the watershed's quite huge. And it will get all this and it will run it into the water system. So unless you really keep it under the natural cover, what's going to happen is you increase all this fine soil will be going into the water system, and that increases what's known as the turbidity of the water. In other words, the water is not as clear as it was. That has huge impacts on all the plants and everything living in the creeks. Well, this is indicating exactly what I was just talking about. We're just a little bit further down this light road that's been pushed into the wilderness here, and you can see how dirty the water is. Now, if this sort of thing is perpetuated when you're building a whole lot of infrastructure, then that sort of stuff there is going to get into the water system. And this gentle slope here would cast off a heck of a lot of water, which would, if the region's cleared, increase the turbidity of that water system out there. So your water quality goes. Well, this water that we've just been looking at is actually about 3 or 4 metres in elevation above the level of the creek there, which is almost the start of Maddens Creek. So although it's gently sloping, over a good distance, that gives you a fair fall. Right, well, we're right here at the upper reaches of Maddens Creek. The water's absolutely beautiful, it's clear, and all around us the native vegetation is so thick, so vibrant, that there's not a weed to be seen. Well, this area is just full of rich biodiversity. It's lovely being here. And as a result, it's this area has been recognised by the National Parks Association for its sheer value. You can see the water is absolutely fantastic. Pouch coral, ferns, frogs, everything you'd want. Well, I'm standing amongst the banks here, and it reminds me very much of the hanging swamp at Stanwell Tops, which again is another wonderful place worthy of preserving. When we reach summer, this area dries out substantially, and it's recognised as a high risk area by the rural fire services. Here's some more fauna, yellow-tailed black cockatoos. Now those cockatoos are fairly secretive. They don't like being near humans. They've actually landed on the trees, which is part of this proposal, and at the moment they've got it good. This is a sweeping view of the area. We're all part of the Darawal Reserve. You can see what an extensive and wide and beautiful catchment area it is at the moment. Well, here we have a map of the whole area. What you've got here is the Darawal State Conservation Area, which is this light green area here, and the Darawal Nature Reserve. Now, this proposal, this development proposal, would be in that location there. Here's the road that we were filming on. This is Madden's Creek, the upper reaches where we were. This proposal actually goes right down to where the model aeroplane site is. And you can see that if there's disturbance of the ground here and there's problems starting there, these problems go into Maddens Creek. From Maddens Creek along to Maddens Falls, we'll be having a look at that shortly. And then from there, the tributary runs all the way along into O'Hare's Creek, and all this ultimately flows into the catchment for the Woronora Dam, and some of the waters also find their way to the Georges River. Now this little diagram here is a cross section of the area, and up here in the Winnemata Shale is where this proposal would be placed. So you can see that if you disturb up there, that would cause disturbance going into all these regions: upland swamp, eucalypt woodland, upland swamp, ironstone woodland, more upland swamp, to Maddens Creek Falls here, and again into the catchment. Well, this is the start of the boardwalk to Madden Falls, and this shows you the concern that National Parks and Wildlife have actually put into to create such a structure. This area is environmentally sensitive, downstream from the proposed development. It shows their consciousness of how fragile the soils are, and how with a large number of people walking over them, that you just cause all sorts of mayhem, erosion and silting and, as we said, turbidity of the water supply behind us. Well, here we have some of the wonderful flora near the Maddens Creek. There's all the Epacris, and over here we have this magnificent grevillea. Absolutely fantastic. They're a wonderful flower. There they are, in the family of Protea. Well, this is extraordinary. Here we have some native waratahs. They're extraordinarily rare these days. This is in the Dharawal Conservation Area, and well, it should be. And when we have such wonderful flowers as these, they have a very small, very slight fragrance, and they're just so, you should be able to pick that up on the camera, just how splendid they are. It just indicates again how this whole area should receive the highest classification of protection, and indeed it does so as best it can from the National Parks and Wildlife Services. And here's the recommencement of the boardwalk to Maddens Falls. We're approaching Madden Creek. Here it is. Lovely lot of frogs. We're upstream from Maddens Falls. What you can see here with the advantage of the video is just how clear this water is. This water is extraordinarily beautiful. Very, very clear. No turbidity. So, magnificent water. This is the pumping system for the Darks Forest orchards. They get their water from Maddens Creek, which is just here. And this water, of course, is just downstream from where this proposed development would take place. If there's any pollution that occurs up there, such as soluble materials that get into the water system, they can't be stopped, well, this would be the first point where the pollution would be having an impact, going to the orchards. This is the weir on Maddens Creek. The take-off point for the orchards is just up there. This whole area is recognised by the Rural Fire Services as extreme fire danger. And this is also found in the applicant's report to council. So this water can be used to fight fires as well. And what we've got to remember is once a year, this whole area, as a minimum, faces the risk of one major fire. Well, we're just down from the weir, as you can see, and here's yet another little tributary which in the wet times gushes forth, and that's just indicative of what a large area we've got here and how much watershed there can be offered. And the water here is just, at the moment, just so wonderful, absolutely clear that you can drink it. And it tastes wonderful. Well, we're just moving across here in Maddens Creek, and you can see that even prior to the dam being constructed, what a very, very wide region we have here. This indicates large water flow, which is what you'd expect. Now this area lends itself to prime platypus habitat, so it warrants further study. Well, here we are in Maddens Creek, and if we just take a small walk up to here, you can see the associated debris of floods, and this is just testimony to how much water comes down Maddens Creek when the rains are on. Walking down Maddens Creek here. Now let's head down to Maddens Falls themselves. Well, here we we are on the observation deck for Maddens Falls, which is all downstream from this proposed development. Well, here we are at the very top of the falls, and over an extraordinary long period of time, small rocks found themselves emplaced in these puddles, gradually moved around, and over millennia carved out these beautiful shapes that you see. We've got little holes within little bigger holes. And over here in front of you, you can see, you can appreciate the quality of the water by how transparent it is. And another indication of the quality of the water is just the number of lichens we have around here. Lichens is a fungus and algae. The fungus actually got the algae inside it and only grow in conditions of very, very good water quality. So this, along with the transparency of the water, indicates how good the water system is here. Now, a highly significant feature, it's actually historical, at Madden Falls here is just this small disturbance in the rock. It's man-made, and it actually features an arrow. Here's the arrow head, and you can see clearly CC. The tops of the C's marked off. Now this is very, very historic and very old. You can see the lichen growing around it as well. This actually refers to this way being the direction of Camp Creek. Now the only way to get to Camp Creek, and that's actually the original name for Helensburgh, was to come from Appin. So the original road went this way, and when they got to the top of this waterfall, where do we go, fellas? Well, we follow the arrow to Camp Creek. So that's the original sign pointing to Helensburgh, that way. So this presentation that you've seen represents what concerned residents think about this whole proposal. And we'd like to see the proposal refuted in the Land Environment Court, and we support wholeheartedly Wollongong City Council in their efforts to deny the proposed development at Maddens Plains.